Anyway, we're going to begin here. We're going to raise the colors on the pole outside. If you guys want to go out, fine, but we're going to begin with a flag raising on the outside pole, and we're going to be having music playing at the same time. So feel free to go out there, and if it's warm enough out when you get out there and you want to, we'll just move the whole ceremony right outside. And that was a joke, see, that's it. Welcome to this Veterans Day ceremony. We're going to begin now. And we will raise the colors on the flagpole. Emma France, a junior from Loyola, will sing the national anthem, but we begin with the introduction song. Go ahead.
Called him Sandy Kane. You folks even knew his name. But a hero, yes, was he. Left boy, come back man. Still many just don't understand about the reasons we are free. I can't forget the look in his eyes, or the tears he cried, as he said these words to me. They all gave some gave all, some stood through for the red, white, and blue.
Okay, we all back in. I apologize for the confusion. We moved this ceremony inside, so we've had to change a little bit of our rhythm and our sequence. The alternative is to be out there freezing yourself real bad. So, by the way, I think I said this, but Emma France is a junior at Loyola Sacred Heart, and my phone's ringing. She sang our national anthem, and thank you, Emma. Okay. Now, can you hear me in the back? I was told it was problematic. Can you hear me back on the steps? Okay. We begin our ceremony with an invocation by Father Robert Noonan.
Lord, you call us here today. You call us that we might remember those who have given their lives or shared their lives for us. Those veterans, Lord, that we honor today, those living and those dead. We pray, Lord, that for those who are still alive, that they may realize our lives are so much better because of their sacrifice. And then, speaking of sacrifice, Lord, we think of those who have died, have given their lives for us. And so, Lord, today we honor these veterans. Veterans going back to the Second World War, through Korea, and through all the other places, Lord, that they served. So be with us today and help us be grateful for their sacrifices. We ask this in God's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Father. We're going to have a little bit of feedback on this mic, so we won't be able to turn up quite as loud as we'd like to. So, anyway, this is the 33rd year that American Legion Post 101, 33rd consecutive year that Post 101 has sponsored this Veterans Day ceremony here at the courthouse. As I said, usually we do it outside of the Doughboy statue, but every year we establish a theme for our ceremony. This year's theme acknowledges the 100th anniversary of the beginning of World War I and the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Vietnam War. And our theme is, every war has its beginning, but does it ever really end? And obviously the message there is that while we send people off to war, sometimes when they come back from that war, they're changed people and their lives can be altered by war. At this point, I want to introduce, on behalf of the County of Missoula, to welcome you all here on behalf of the county. She's an old hand at this. She's pretty tough too. She wanted to actually go outside today. She was lobbying for that. But I said, no, we've got to think about these other people. And so I want to introduce, to welcome on behalf of Missoula County Commissioner Gene Curtis.
And Dan, we had the clock working this year, and then we weren't outside. Last year the clock didn't chime, if you remember, because of some of the things going on with construction. So on behalf of Missoula County, I'm glad to welcome you here. I'm glad we're inside. It's a little bit warmer than outside, but we must turn the heat off on the days the courthouse is closed because it's chilly. Some of you may have noticed, that those of you who come every year, that I always wear that blue coat. That was my grandma's. And she did give one of her sons to World War II. So it's kind of my honor. About 20 years ago, I had the privilege of filming a series of World War II vets talking about their experiences in the European and the Pacific theaters. Missoula County Public Schools sponsored this Eyewitness to Combat adult learning series, and it aired on MCAT. I was thinking I should call them and have them run it again because it's really interesting to hear them talk about their experience. But I remember these vets talking about the things they did to survive in the field. You know, that man up, keep going, be strong. One of my favorite stories was the one about someone who was in the European theater, and General Patton came and told them they all need to wear their neckties. And these guys were thinking, who cares about a necktie? But it was weather like this, and actually the necktie kept you warmer because it kept your shirt closed. So there was a reason for it. So what we don't do as well is to prepare or provide for veterans when they come home. There's no way you can go to war and not change. So they come home changed. Their family is probably changed because people have had to take on different roles. But I was also thinking this morning about the fact that veterans don't talk about their experience very well. They keep it to themselves. My dad was in World War II. I don't remember him ever telling me a story. My father-in-law did tell a couple stories. Once I shared with him about the stories these folks from that Eyewitness to Combat told me. So we aren't good at that. There are some vets who don't want to be labeled with having PTSD. They really all have PTSD. You can't go to war or not. But I read recently this quote: "A veteran is a person who at one point in their life wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including his or her own life. So the United States owes them whatever they need when they come back." Luckily, we have a couple great senators who have worked hard on that, and we now apparently seem to be shaking up the VA, which is important. So we must honor them and take care of them and their family. I read this other quote that said, "Heroes don't wear capes, they wear dog tags." Thanks for coming.
Good morning. I am going to read a letter that we received from Senator John Tester, and it goes as follows. It's dated Veterans Day, November 11th, 2014. Today we honor the tremendous sacrifices that our nation's veterans have made. Thank you to all the men and women and your families who selflessly serve our nation at home and abroad. We owe you all a debt of great gratitude. As a senior member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, I will continue to fight hard to make sure that veterans have access to the services they have earned. As you know, it was a tough year for Americans veterans in the Department of Veteran Affairs. Reports of mismanagement at the VA dominated the news. Investigations were launched, we had a change in the VA leadership, and I embarked on a statewide veterans listening session to hear from Montana veterans about the challenges they face every day. I got some great information. Veterans don't mince words. They shoot straight, and I appreciate that. So when Congress comes back in session, I will take that feedback and continue to work to improve access to care for all veterans. Because the sacrifices you make are great, and we must do our very best to honor you. Thank you again, and a happy Veterans Day. Signed, John Tester, United States Senator. And now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce my friend of many years and the adjutant of Post 101, Mr. Dan Gallagher, to say a few words.
Appreciate it. Today we recognize the 100th anniversary of the beginning of World War I and the 50th anniversary of the start of the Vietnam War in 1964. When Gavrilo Princip murdered the Archduke of Austria in June 1914 in what today would be called a terrorist act, he set in motion a series of events that were mistakes or arrogance, actually. It plunged the world into war, entangling alliances, hyper-nationalism, influential corporate munitions makers, backward-looking, unyielding array of generals and military planners, and citizens who seemed oblivious to where war would lead everyone, all combined to start the guns of August firing, and they wouldn't stop for 4 years until 20 million people had died as victims of that war. 50 years later, another war began for pretty much the same reasons, as a U.S. Navy destroyer was fired on by North Vietnamese PT boats. 2 days later, another such attack was reported, found later to be a false report, and the engine of war was revved up as American aircraft were sent to attack sites in North Vietnam. 3 days after that, on August 7, 1964, Congress passed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution authorizing the president to take military action against North Vietnam. And within a few months, American GIs were on the ground in Southeast Asia, and by the time they left 10 years later, 58,000 of their comrades had died in battle, and American society was in shreds. You know, it's funny, actually it's sad, really, how we start our wars enthusiastically, almost romantically, like the mother who stood on a Boston street in 1862 and watched her son parade off to war in his brand new uniform, proclaiming as she stood there with tears of joy and pride in her cheek, that God has been so good to me that I should live to see this day. By the way, her son died at Chancellorsville. We send our young men and women off to battle filled with patriotic fervor that seems to ignore the reality that many of those going in harm's way will never come home again, and those that do will be forever changed, and usually not in a good way. Perhaps Eric Remarque told it more accurately in introduction to his great World War I book, All Quiet on the Western Front, when he said that the story he told was, quote, least of all an adventure, for death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. The wars begin, but do they ever really end for those who return home as veterans to live with the war's residue? Did it ever truly end for America's doughboys who came back home in 1919? Well, after an initial welcome, these ex-soldiers had to deal with the effects of enemy shells and trench warfare and mustard gas attacks and the trauma of war. And the government's Veterans Bureau, which did little to provide meaningful care for their medical, psychological, or economic needs, was soon disgraced by a scandal when its director was jailed for stealing huge amounts of money from the Veterans Bureau itself, from their coffers. And when in 1932 many of these veterans traveled to Washington, D.C. to seek payment of a promised bonus, they were fired on by soldiers wearing the very uniform that they had worn so nobly just 15 years earlier. Now, of course, this is not a new thing in the history of humankind. For example, there's supposedly inscribed on a wall in a fortress in Gibraltar from the 15th century these words, God and the soldier all men adore in times of danger and no more. And when danger is past and all things righted, God is forgotten and the soldier is slighted. Would the returning Vietnam veteran fare any better than his World War I predecessor? Well, we already know the answer to that. The war in Vietnam divided the people of America like no issue since the Civil War. And when the Vietnam veteran returned, the division, the animosity, the uneasiness that Americans felt toward the war was deposited squarely on the most obvious reminders and the living symbols of that war, the Vietnam vets. The war aged Vietnam veterans far beyond their teenage years. They came back, as Vietnam veteran and author Philip Caputo said in A Rumor of War, quote, with young shoulders that bore rather old heads. They returned to face epithets from fellow citizens, from the baby killer slurs from some who opposed the war to whiner and loser aspersions from many who supposedly supported their efforts. They were greeted with a veterans benefit package that was not even on a par with what had awaited returning veterans of an earlier generation. 10 years after their war had ingloriously ended, Vietnam vets still had an unemployment rate nearly triple the national average. The VA denied the existence of problems that were due to their exposure to the defoliant Agent Orange and to the trauma of fighting a guerrilla war. And it required them to produce unobtainable evidence of the specific military action that was the source of their claim, an impossible task. And to this day, the VA continues to play hide the P with Vietnam veterans' PTSD and Agent Orange claims, as well as obstructing their access to medical care. Perhaps that's one reason why, according to reliable statistics, more Vietnam veterans have died by their own hand than the number killed by the declared enemy. And the suicide remains a problem among veterans today with our latest generation of veterans. So clearly for the veterans who survived Vietnam, as for the veterans who came back from World War I, their wars, which began with such certainty, never really ended for them in all the years following their return home. The collective veteran story may be, at its gloomiest, just as Remarque said, a story, quote, about a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped its shells, were destroyed by the war. But need this be the end of the story? Was there, or is there any redemption for the veterans of the wars whose beginnings we remember today? Is there any good that did or can come out of the sacrifice? Well, let's look at it. Even though they themselves didn't gain education or home loans or unemployment assistance from the government that they'd so nobly served, the veterans of World War I would band together to serve their country in later wars by writing the most comprehensive veterans assistance legislation in history, the GI Bill. That's right, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, an assistance package that has benefited veterans ever since, was literally created and written by organized veterans of World War I. Paying it forward, I'd say that was a pretty positive result coming from an otherwise negative experience. And what about Vietnam vets? What sort of positive legacy will they leave? Well, aside from their continued service to country, perhaps the greatest contribution the Vietnam veteran is making is through his experience and by his example, reminding our nation that when our people and our government send its young people to war, it has no choice but to welcome them home, to see that they're received with warmth and recognition, to care for them in the manner that's most needed by them, and to demand that the Veterans Care Agency does its job and meets our country's legal and moral obligation to its defenders. The veterans of Vietnam and the doughboys who returned from France felt the effects of their wars long after the guns fell silent. And the same is true in one form or another for the veterans of our other wars in American history. But although we can't deny it, veterans need not mire themselves in a troubled past. They can use it to build from and grow from and serve others. While never forgetting their veteran experience, they have and they can rise above it. As John Kennedy said in 1963, we need not feel the bitterness of the past to discover its meaning for the present and the future. And that certainly can be said to be true for America's veterans. American veterans of all eras share one special truth. They're all part of a long line of honor, a line that stretches back to Valley Forge and forward to Fallujah. And that truth merits the thanks and welcome of all Americans. In 1979, the VA administrator, triple amputee Max Cleland, Vietnam veteran, said that, quote, all Vietnam veterans have a certain hole in their soul that can only be healed with special thanks. And that's true for all who've served our nation in war. So, to all of you here today who are veterans, to all the veterans who might later see or hear or read about this Welcome Home tribute, to all the veterans who couldn't be here today, and to all those veterans who will never again be here, I say to you on this Veterans Day 2014, thank you, and welcome home, soldier. Welcome back from the war.
My name is Carter David. Dave Carter, served in World War II in Pacific Field.
Sam Rockwell, Army Sergeant in Korea, 1950-51. John Farkas, Captain, U.S. Army, Vietnam.
Stephen Beers, United States Army, Infantry Captain, Operation Iraqi Freedom.
And you stood for us in battle. We bow for you in prayer, hoping that you feel our love and know how much we care. We say it loud that we're so proud of you in every way. How we thank the Lord we're together on this day. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome home. Welcome home to those who love you and the place where you belong. As you fought the fight for freedom, you are not alone. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome home. Thank you for your courage as you face the enemy. You sacrificed and gladly paid the price for liberty. You'll always be our hero, for you have done your best. We know you must be weary, and you have earned your rest. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome home. Welcome home to those who love you and the place where you belong. As you fought the fight for freedom, you are not alone. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome As soldiers for a mighty cause, we're marching on our way to the place where by His grace we will hear Him say, welcome home, faithful soldier, welcome home. Welcome home to those who love you and the place where you belong. As you fought the fight for freedom, you are not alone. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome home. Welcome home, faithful soldier. Welcome home.
Now, it is my honor and privilege to introduce the Mayor of Missoula, John Engen, who will make a few remarks concerning Veterans Day.
Well, thank you all very much, and I want to thank Dan once again for his fabulous words. Every year I learn a little something from Dan, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also very grateful for the fact that he elected to move us inside this year. I think he deserves a round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. What I know about Dan is that he thrives on positive reinforcement, so let's keep that up. Make sure we're inside again next year, maybe, if the weather is inclement. Folks, it's a bittersweet pleasure to be here every year to honor veterans and their memories and the folks who are living today. And in this hall today, Veterans Day becomes much less abstract, because as I look around the room, I see Sam and John and Rondo and Jerry and Mike and Larry and Greg and Martin and many others who have served one way or another in one war or another, in one place or another, taking care of us in ways that many of us wouldn't be capable of doing. And they do it because of timing, and they do it because of honor, and they do it because of courage, and in some cases they do it because of age. And as I stand here today, I think about the poster that's on the wall in front of my desk at home, and it's of the 164th Infantry, Company I, World War II. That was my dad's outfit. He would be 93 years old on this Veterans Day. He died in 2010, but we're reasonably convinced that part of him died in the 1940s as well. And I think that's the case for many. We end up numbed in some ways, in ways that folks don't talk about or try to explain. And the fact of the matter is, as I look around this room, I see the young man who's representing the World War I soldier here, and I look at that poster on my wall, and I realize that my dad, who would have been 93, was 17, and he was as young, and forgive me, young man, it's all about perspective, skinny, and in some ways innocent. He's not the guy we ought to be sending to war any more than you are, or your sister for that matter. So one of the things we do in a hall like this today is acknowledge that tremendous service and sacrifice, acknowledge the fact that there are people who will commit everything they have to a cause, to their fellow human beings, but also acknowledge that we ought to figure out ways so that we don't force them to make those calls, so that we don't force 17-year-old kids to sign up and go fight our battles for us. We've got to work harder to figure all of that out, so that on Veterans Day we're spending more time acknowledging peace and the product of all of those lives sacrificed and that innocence lost, and that we continue to acknowledge the pain while recognizing that there's more to us than that as a nation and as a world. So thank you, veterans, for all you've done, all that you continue to do, all that we owe you, and forgive us for all that we have not done and will never be able to do to make you whole. But to the degree that we can, to the degree that we can acknowledge you today, to the degree that we can say we love and appreciate and respect you, thank you.
I want to, first of all, thank Mayor Engen, but also echo something he just said. And I think as veterans, one of the things that if we could be able to do so would be to somehow make Veterans Day a holiday of the past, a celebration of the past. If we could be the last generation of veterans, of war veterans, that would be our goal. So anyway, thank you, Mayor. Keith?
Well, this letter is a little bit faint, but I'll do my best to convey its contents to you. So if it gets jumbled a little bit, it's just that I can't see the print too well. But anyway, this is from John Walsh, United States Senator. And it's dated November 11th, 2014. And it reads, "Friends, today we honor all veterans who sacrificed everything to protect their American freedoms. We owe a great debt of gratitude to each of these patriots, Americans who fought for the rights and liberties we hold so dear. Today we gather to reflect on their sacrifices. As our troops are engaged around the world, we must be mindful of our dedicated servicemen and women and their courageous families. We must honor their service and their sacrifice with more than just political rhetoric. but with courageous action, standing up for them as they have so honorably stood for us. I am proud to be the first Iraq War combat veteran to serve in the United States Senate, and I know firsthand the sacrifices our service members have made overseas. As a nation, we do an excellent job in taking citizens and transforming them into soldiers, but we haven't always succeeded in taking those soldiers and returning them to society. We have to do a better job taking care of our veterans once they leave the battlefield, and I hope to be your partner in tackling these issues head on. That means pushing for better VA care and the passage of legislation that will improve mental health care access for our fighting men and women. Together, we can do better for our veterans. They answered the call of duty when our nation needed them most. Now it is time to uphold our responsibilities and deliver the resources they have earned. To all veterans, thank you for your service. John E. Walsh, United States Senate.
And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, our main speaker. And I'm very grateful that he could find his way to Missoula today, and hopefully he'll make it back to the governor's office without freezing himself to death. But I want to, in all seriousness, to thank, as I introduce our next speaker, Governor Steve Wolf.
Thanks, Dan. I was speaking to Mike Halligan as we were gathering before this, and Mike had been in Vietnam 45 years ago. 45 years later, that he still has such vivid memories of the challenges, of the moments of combat. And it strikes me that whether you were in combat 70 years ago now, 45 years ago now, or last year, those same striking as if it was yesterday memories will be part of every single one of our veterans here today, no matter the time. Mike also, almost if it was yesterday, remembered the first time that he was asked to be part of the Missoula Veterans Day ceremony, and that was in the early 80s, and it was a younger Dan Gallagher that was heading up the ceremony. And he remembers going out and he's about to speak, and the mayor at the time jumps ahead and says, "Can I speak for a couple minutes?" And then the mayor went on and spoke for 15 minutes. Maybe why Mike Halligan remembers it so well is that day it was 10 degrees below zero, and there was no talk of going inside. So I don't know if over time, Dan, you've gotten a little bit softer or you think all of us have, but either way, I guess time passes. It is an honor, though, to get to join all of you today as we give thanks for the service and the sacrifice of the men and women who wear the uniform of our nation, and that we honor the memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice on our behalf. But today has to be a day that is more than about just honoring and remembering. There has to be more to this day. You know, we in Montana, we have the second highest proportion of veterans in the country. More than 10% of our state currently or previously serving or being a member of their immediate family. So while we gather here today, That really means that nearly every one of us has a loved one, a father, a mother, a brother, or a sister who's currently serving or has previously served in our armed forces. For them, it has to be more than just a day about honoring and remembering as well. We've seen the firsthand sacrifices that these brave men and women make while serving our country. We recognize that while the time that they may serve may be limited, the scars of battle, both physical and mental, last much longer. When we as a nation send our soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines out to defend our freedoms, we're also making a promise that when they return, that we all will ensure that they have access to care for those wounds, be those wounds physical or mental, that they'll be able to find a job that allows them to continue to provide for themselves and their families, that will give them access to education to help them continue their career. Unfortunately, far too often, we only fill our promises to our veterans halfway. When they return, they struggle to find quality physical and mental health care. They're unable to secure a job. They don't have the network of support. They're unable to continue to pursue an education. I think here in Montana, we recognize that that's unacceptable. And we know that we always have to continue to take better steps. We're working to ensure both employers and educational institutions recognize the valuable skills that our servicemen and women gain. Skills that from prior learning assessments, skills in the military that directly translate into skills for employment, that directly translate into college credits. And we should recognize and provide that. We've also secured $5 million recently to help our long-term unemployed, especially veterans, access apprenticeship programs that allow them to earn a fair wage while learning valuable skills that will help them continue their civilian careers. Be it Missoula College, University of Montana, any of our educational systems, or our higher ed systems. We got money last time for what we call the Veteran Success Initiative. That if a veteran walks into any one of our campuses, they deserve a little bit more attention. They deserve to have their brothers and sisters with them to say, we know that some of the challenges that you'll face on these campuses, and we're here to help you get through that. But there's still work to be done to fulfill all our promises, and certainly all of our promises for adequate health care. All too often we assume that veterans can get all the care they might need at the VA clinics. And while the health professionals at these facilities work hard and do an amazing job, they face budgets that are too small to keep up and workloads that are too large. Veterans have to travel long distances to access care at these facilities. And many other veterans simply don't qualify for services at VA facilities. And I think that's unacceptable. I think our veterans kept their promises to us. And I think that we need to make sure that Montana keeps our promises to them. We need to constantly be working. And we do have opportunities to better keep those promises. We have an opportunity to change health care issues, to provide care for the 9,500 veterans and family members who are currently uninsured or underinsured. There are funds on the table to do that. Now our legislature just needs to say yes, to accept money to provide health coverage. I'm committed to getting that done for our vets and our families, and we can. When our vets return home from battle overseas, they shouldn't have to battle to get health care, basic services, and education at home. I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this. More importantly, I want to thank our veterans and our families for the sacrifices they've made for protecting those freedoms that we hold dear. But remember, it's not just a day to give thanks or to honor. It really is a day to remember that we still have promises that we have to fulfill. As governor, there's no responsibility I take more seriously than fulfilling the promises that we as a state and as a society has made to those that wear the uniform. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Governor Bullock. By the way, Governor, it's not that I've gotten older or softer, it's just that I know that Mike Halligan has, so that's why I moved it in. Did you hear that, Mike? Now we have the portion of our ceremony that where all of you get to remember a veteran that's important in your life, where we place flowers on this stand in remembrance. We particularly remember today the beginnings of two wars, World War I and Vietnam, but it's designed to remember, this ceremony is designed to remember the service and sacrifice of veterans of all eras as well. Remembering veterans collectively, remembering all those who stand in a long line of honor in which our defenders have always stood. But this is also, maybe more importantly, a time to remember veterans who are part of our personal lives, an opportunity for all of you here today to pay tribute, offer remembrance, a moment to express what your veteran, the veterans in your life meant to you, what they've meant to each of us, and to do so by placing a flower on this honor table as your expression of respect. Bruce Catton, Civil War historian, a young man in the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, and he saw Civil War veterans who would sit around the town who were aging and who would sit on the park benches, and he would sit and listen to their stories. And he knew that these old men, in the lifetime that he'd known them, had never been more than 50 miles or so down the dusty trails. But he, in his words, he said that once, long ago, they marched to distant battlefields and had seen beyond the furthest horizon. And then he noted that they were passing, and he said this about the loss that we were feeling. He said, one by one, they went up the sun-swept hilltop to sleep beneath the lilacs. And as they departed, we were losing more than we could know. For these old soldiers, simply by existing, had unfailingly expressed the faith we lived by. It was a faith in the continuity of the human experience, in the ability to come triumphantly through any challenge. That faith lived, and we lived by it. So, with that in mind, we begin our flower placement portion of the ceremony. And we'll have all of you, we have an initial portion of this flower placement ceremony where we'll have Jacqueline Quinn, who's a Vietnamese American, John Garrity, a Vietnam veteran, member of Post 101, and one of the founders of Missoula Veterans for Peace, and Bobby Hardy, our student Vietnam veteran, will come forward with flowers for the Vietnam veterans, and then Hayes Autopolic, who is the supplier of our military equipment, and our supplier, and probably the United States Army's supplier as much as he has, and Ethel McCready, whose father was a World War I veteran, and our student, World War I veteran as well, will come up with flowers. After that, each of you can come forward and place a flower on this stand. And what I'd ask you to do, if we were outside, there'd be more room to form a line, but form a line back there. Olivia and Sammy will be handing you flowers, and you each come forward. Feel free to speak the name of the person you're remembering, salute, make the sign of the cross, whatever gesture you please, and then place the flower on this table in remembrance of the veteran you're honoring. So, in remembrance of those veterans, the veterans that are important in your life, come forward with your flowers to honor them, to remember them, the veterans who stand in that long line of honor. If you could kind of clear a little path so that our, first of all, Jacqueline, Quinn, and John.
Wayne Allman, who a Marine wounded in Vietnam, who died this year, was a personal friend of mine.
That's very true, this one.
Don't buy that.
Specialist Jose Ruiz, Staff Sergeant Randy Collins, Chaplain Bill Getz.
Are there any others? There are more flowers. Anyone else?
The following letter is from Steve Daines, Congressman. Dear friends, as Montanans, we are blessed to have a strong legacy of service, and we are proud of the sacrifices made by the more than 100,000 veterans who call Montana home. While their service deserves our appreciation every day, Veterans Day gives our nation a special opportunity to honor all of the men and women who have served in our nation's armed forces. From those who took up arms for independence to those who are serving in uniform today, we are eternally indebted to them. We may not be able to repay that debt, but our nation must honor and fulfill the promises we have made. We have a responsibility to support our veterans when they return home, aiding reintegration into civilian life with job training for returning heroes, ensuring all veterans receive care that treats them with the dignity they deserve, and supporting those with mental health wounds. Millions of brave American men and women have stepped up and served our nation in uniform, and because of their courage and valor, our nation and the world are more secure and free. Please join me today in honoring our nation's veterans and thanking all who have answered the call. May God bless our veterans today and every day. Sincerely, Steve Dane.
Okay, we are going to place wreaths on stands that will be in front of the podium here. I would ask the governor and the mayor and County Commissioner Curtis to please to line up alongside the honor table. Olivia Round and Sammy Worcester will bring the wreaths forward, and Emma France, the cross flags. Olivia will bring those, but anyway, accompanied by our student soldiers. And by the way, I want to thank these young people from Loyola High School. Emma sang the national anthem, Olivia and Samuel, and all of our period soldiers. They participated. They took time out of school, which was really a difficult task to get them to do that. But they've done a great job, and I want to thank them, and I think we should give them a round of applause there. And thanks also to all the people here at the county for letting us come inside out of the cold. And as far as announcements, I believe there are some other ceremonies around town today. There were breakfasts earlier today, and I frankly don't have a list of what's happening, but I'm sure that you can find out. Also, after this ceremony is over, for all the veterans and veterans' families and everybody who attended this ceremony, and frankly, just people in general, and that we will be serving at the Old Post Pub, American Legion Post 101 business establishment. We will again be serving for free the delicious treat that you all came to love when you were in the service, chip beef on toast. And as my usual shtick goes like this, it's also known as SOS, and we all know what SOS stands for, right? It stands for chip beef on toast. And also, let me express my appreciation to Father Noonan, to County Commissioner Curtis, Mayor Ingen, and to Governor Bullock, and everyone else who's been involved in this ceremony, the people in Post 101. So we now move to the wreath laying ceremony. Sam will carry the colors out there and will bring the wreaths forward, and the governor and mayor and county commissioner will put the wreaths on stands that I will shortly be putting out there for. So the wreaths, we put wreaths up. Ever wondered why we use wreaths? I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think it's because the wreaths are an endless circle. They're a symbol of eternity. In a sense, it symbolizes that long line of honor that's bent into a symbolic endless circle. Pay tribute to the honored dead, to those to whom the rigors of warfare kept from rest, who were denied peace by the horror of war, and those whose very lives were taken and futures made impossible. So now for those who made the supreme sacrifice, we place these wreaths, these long lines of honor bent into an endless symbolic circle, in remembrance of our honored dead, in remembrance of them, in respect for them, in the honor we give them, in the faith we share with them, and in the love with which we will forever hold them. May they rest in eternal peace.
I was there in the winter of '64 when we camped in the ice and Nashville was gone. 300 miles our trail lay to lay. Barely had time to carry on the day. When the Yankees charged and the colors flared.
Would our soldiers come forward with them, please?
When we called retreat, it was almost dark. I died with a grape shot in my heart. Say a prayer for peace for every fallen son. Set my spirit free.
Lutheran salute.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. It concludes our ceremony. We're going to retire the colors, take the colors back. But that concludes our ceremony. So thank you and stay warm.
Blessed Mother, place where I was born. Scars, yeah, she's got her scars. Sometimes it's scars of worry. Still, I don't want